My name is Ted Lucas, and I'd like to talk to you about one of my favorite composers. This composer is one of the most underrated and overlooked composers of the early 20th century. Born in Paris in 1893, this composer died at age 24 in 1918 and left us only 22 published works. Who is this composer? Lili Boulanger. Born Marie-Juliette Boulanger and named Lili by her older sister, she was the second child of Ernest Boulanger, a composer and professor of music at the Paris Conservatory. Her mother was Raïssa Michetskaya, a Russian princess and student of Professor Boulanger at the conservatory. Their first child, Lili's older sister, was the renowned composition teacher Nadia Boulanger, an organist, conductor, composer, and the first woman to conduct the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. Mademoiselle Boulanger's students number in the hundreds and include such preeminent musicians as Aaron Copland, Philip Glass, Virgil Thompson, Daniel Barenboim, John Carlo Menotti, Roy Harris, Elliott Carter, and even her little sister, Lili. When Lili was just 2 years old, Gabriel Fauré, a longtime friend of the family, noticed that Lili had perfect pitch, and so he encouraged the family to provide music lessons for Lili. Also at the age of 2, Lili contracted a serious case of bronchial pneumonia and was ill most of her life. The family bought a large flat on the top floor of the building at 36 Rue Ballu, and that is where Nadia Boulanger taught all of her students for the remainder of her life. Shortly thereafter, Lili's father died. She was only 6 years old. Raïssa had little income, and Lili was too ill and too young to work, so Nadia had to take on students, and that was the beginning of her career as a composition teacher. Lili accompanied her older sister Nadia to classes at the Paris Conservatory, and she took lessons in piano, harp, violin, cello, and took lessons in composition from her older sister Nadia. Lili was also an accomplished singer and would often sight-sing songs with Gabriel Fauré at the piano. Her compositions showed great talent, so her family and friends encouraged her to consider entering the competition for the Prix de Rome. The Grand Prix de Rome was the most prestigious composition prize in France. The winner got to spend 2 to 5 years at the Villa Medici in Rome, doing nothing but composing music. It also guaranteed publication of your compositions, commissions, public performances of your work, and maybe even a place in the music history books and encyclopedias. Winners of the Prix de Rome include Hector Berlioz, Ernest Boulanger when he was 20, Charles Gounod, Georges Bizet, Jules Massenet, and most famous of all, Claude Debussy. Winning the Prix de Rome is similar to winning the Pulitzer Prize in composition in the United States. You would know the names of many of the Pulitzer Prize winners: Aaron Copland, Howard Hanson, Charles Ives, Samuel Barber, and many more. So in 1912, at the age of 18, Lili Boulanger entered the competition for the Prix de Rome. She emerged as one of the finalists, but during the performance of her piece, she collapsed and was eliminated from the competition. In fact, no prize was awarded that year. The following year, when she was 19, she entered the competition again, and this time she won the grand prize, becoming the first woman in history to win the Prix de Rome. There were 3 finalists from among the dozen or so students from the conservatory, and each of the 3 students was given the same libretto. In this case, it was a poem about the love between Dr. Faust and Helen of Troy. Each student was told to write a 30-minute cantata, and they had 2 weeks to do that. Lili Boulanger is not the first woman finalist in the Prix de Rome. In fact, 5 years earlier, her sister Nadia was a finalist, but she won second prize. Lili became immediately famous. She became known as a child genius and a divine gift to the artistic world, placed on earth for a short period of time to breathe new life into music. But at the same time, she was seen as a femme fragile. She was very small, thin, frail, and fragile, but yet a true musical genius. Lili's winning of the Prix de Rome paved the way for women composers in France, with 6 more women winning the prize before it was discontinued in 1968. It wasn't until 1983 that a woman won the Pulitzer Prize in Composition in the United States. Her name is Ellen Zillick, and she is still composing. In fact, she just completed a cello concerto. So now, let's listen to Lili Boulanger's prize-winning composition. It's called Faust et Hélène, or Faust and Helen, and it is like a one-act opera that tells the story of Dr. Faust's love for Helen of Troy. It's scored for 3 singers and a large orchestra. The singers are a tenor who sings Dr. Faust, a baritone who sings Mephistopheles, and a mezzo-soprano who sings Helen of Troy. The style of the piece is very much in the style of Richard Wagner and at times Claude Debussy. So let's listen to some of the things we want to be aware of in this opening prelude. As I said before, she's an admirer of Wagner, and in this prelude she quotes Wagner, quotes some of the themes from his operas. The first theme we want to listen for is the kiss motif from Wagner's opera Parsifal. In this scene, Kundry kisses Parsifal, after which he suffers great physical pain, the physical pain that his king suffered. Now let's listen to that part of Boulanger's prelude where we hear her quote that exact motif. By the way, quoting other composers is fair game. It's a practice that goes all the way back to Bach and Handel, and it's still practiced today. Another Wagner quote in her prelude is the Tristan motif from Wagner's opera Tristan und Isolde. This is a very famous place in music history because it includes what we call the Tristan chord. This is a very famous chord. You'll hear it as soon as the oboe enters. Now let's listen to the place in her prelude where she quotes that theme. You'll hear it in the violins first. And then she does it again a little later, this time actually in the oboe. One could almost do an entire lecture on that one chord, on Wagner's Tristan chord, because it is so vague, it is difficult to tell where the tonal center is, and audiences at that time were very disturbed by it, because they couldn't tell what key it was in. This chord essentially signals the beginning of the long march towards atonality, towards the music of Arnold Schoenberg, Anton Webern, and their followers. So now let's listen to the entire prelude to the opening of the curtain in Faust and Helena. It's only 2 minutes long. Notice in the last 2 measures, she actually has an inversion of the Tristan motif, twice. Now, some scholars have criticized her for copying Wagner, but what I think is that she did that intentionally. She was very clever. She knew that many of the judges were Wagner fans, and in fact her good friend Gabrielle Fauré often spoke of what a genius Wagner was. So I think it was intentional on her part. We have to remember that at this time, the music of Richard Wagner was considered to be modern music. It was very avant-garde. It wasn't until after the turn of the century that Wagner's opera Parsifal was even heard outside of Germany. So she wasn't looking back. She was being very contemporary and very modern as she employs the harmonies and the leitmotifs of Richard Wagner. So now, rather than give you a synopsis of the cantata, I'm going to play short excerpts of the highlights, and we can follow the synopsis as we go along. So the curtain opens, and we see that it's early evening, and Faust is asleep on the grass, and the spirits of the air are encircling him around his head, and we can see that he's having a lovely dream. So here is the music for that dream. It's a beautiful French horn solo. At this point, Mephistopheles enters. He sees Faust asleep, and he sees the spirits of the air, and he tells the spirits that they must obey Faust's every wish. Faust awakens, and he sings of the beauty and the fragrances of the evening. This is a very beautiful place, one of my favorite places in this work. Mephistopheles notices that Faust is awake and asks him what he was dreaming about. Faust says that he was dreaming about the beautiful Helen of Troy, and that he wants Mephistopheles to bring Helen to him. Mephistopheles says that's not a good idea, bringing someone from the past like that, who caused so much death and destruction, could incur the wrath of God. Faust says, I want Helen. And Mephistopheles asks him, is that really your wish? And Faust says, yes, that's my wish. And Mephistopheles says, well, this very well could be your final wish. And then Faust sings of his desire, calling to Helen, saying, come to me, come through the ages, I love you, come, come. At this point in the score, Boulanger calls for Mephistopheles to make magic gestures with his hands, making circles in the air and bringing Helen from the grave. The music at this point is very interesting. It reminds me a little bit of movie music. Suddenly a misty figure begins to appear in the night, and little by little Faust recognizes that it's Helen. He sings, Ah, Helene! Helen, on the other hand, is quite disturbed at having been awakened from her long sleep, and she asks, who has done this to me? Faust is so excited to see Helen, he calls her eternal beauty. He tells her that he loves her. Helen sings, love is a curse. Faust sings, no, love is divine. And now we have an extended duet between Faust and Helen. He tells her how much he loves her, how much he will suffer the pains of hell just for one kiss. She says she is not deserving of love. She says she's a bad person. So much blood was spilled on her behalf. On her behalf, thousands of warriors lost their lives. And Faust says, yes, but they died smiling in the memory of your beauty. Then Faust sings, do you remember the first time you were stirred by an ardent kiss? And Helen begins to weaken, and then Faust kisses her. And suddenly she feels alive, she feels reborn. She sings now of the hot flames of desire pulsing through her body. After a passionate kiss, they both continue to sing of the hot flames of desire. And the music gets louder and the singing gets louder, and then we hear a timpani beat. And suddenly they're both singing in octaves. Another timpani beat, more singing in octaves. The third timpani beat is the climax of this entire scene, where they sing the word ah, and it is marked with 3 Fs, fortissimo. Following this climax, they begin to sing in what's known as a canon. It's kind of like a round, where Faust is singing a melody, and 2 beats later, Helen sings exactly the same melody. This is something that was expected by the judges, that a student could write a good canon. So let's listen to the climax. There's some fascinating writing here. Whereas before, Helen was singing in the mezzo-soprano register and Faust was singing in the tenor register, little by little, their voices get closer and closer together as the passion builds. And now what we're going to hear is that they both begin singing on the same note. And towards the end of this phrase, as they sing, je t'aime, I love you, at the end, Helen is actually 5 notes lower than the tenor. Let's hear that. And now Faust begins to sing about how lovely the evening is, when Mephistopheles interrupts him and says things are about to turn ugly. We notice that the moon turns blood red and orange clouds begin to fill the sky. And then Mephistopheles shouts and says, "Look, in the distance, there are thousands of blood-covered ghosts, the dead warriors of the Trojan Wars, coming to take Helen back to her grave." Helen sings that she doesn't want to leave Faust. She wants to stay. Faust says the same thing, "I want you to stay with me." But now the soldiers are pulling on her, trying to separate her from Faust. And Mephistopheles says, "Come, follow me." But Faust won't let go of Helen, and she won't leave him. They sing about how much they love each other, how much they don't want to be separated. And again, Mephistopheles warns them that they need to get out of there. As Mephistopheles and the soldiers are attempting to separate Faust and Helen, Suddenly there appears a ghost coming out of the darkness. We soon see that it is Paris. Paris is her lover. Paris is the one who abducted her from Sparta, or as some stories go, they eloped together to Troy, and this was the cause of the Trojan Wars. Faust says, "You leave, get out of here, you ghost, you phantom, you demon." But eventually they are separated, and Helen sings, "Adieu, adieu." This is the only place in this work where we have a spoken word, adieu. So Paris and the warriors carry Helen off, and Mephistopheles and Faust are left alone. And then Mephistopheles shouts, "We have tempted the wrath of God. We are doomed." The words are sur nous malheur, literally on us bad things. Woe is us, we are doomed, sur nous malheur. And he whispers that at the end of this cantata. And then the orchestra ends with a tragic chord on C minor. After the publication of Faust and Helen, Lili Boulanger became the talk of the musical establishment in Paris, and she went on to compose some very beautiful works, very much in the style of Debussy. And that's why I feel that Lili Boulanger is the third great Impressionist composer, along with Claude Debussy and Maurice Ravel. Thank you for watching this, and I hope you watch my next lecture as we listen to some later music of Lili Boulanger.